As we continue to take a look at what the newly appointed ministers have to offer Nigerians and how they intend to uplift the economy, many have applauded the creation of new ministries under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration. One of the newly created ministries that will be closely looked at is the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, which will be headed by former Osun State Governor Agbaje Oyetola. According to experts and stakeholders in marine and aquatic sector of Nigeria's economy, the creation of this ministry is a rare display of the federal government's urgency to breathe life and tap into the economic development opportunities at the sea. They hold the view that the new ministry, if taken seriously and given the adequate resources to function optimally, will set the nation on a path of economic prosperity and growth. Joining us now on the morning show as we take a look at what to expect from the ministry is Jimmy Agbaje, a former PDP governorship candidate for Lagos State, who back in 2015, Mr. Agbaje promised to develop an ocean economy to enhance the economic well-being of peoples living in rural riverine areas, I should say, of the state. He'll be sharing with us how the ministry can reap from the vast ocean and maritime resources. Also joining us is Sonny Iroche, an senior academic fellow at the African Studies Center of the University of Oxford, who is also a graduate of zoology with specialization in fisheries and marine biology, where he graduated from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Great to have you both. Welcome to the show. I'll come to you first in the studio, sir. You talked about an ocean economy, which is really, really a big one if properly harnessed. Break it down what you were saying in that campaign. I'm not taking you back to your election campaign days. You never know. Maybe you might run again.
No. I mean, politics, this is not time for politics.
Yes.
Basically, at that time, the campaign theme was bold ideas, new opportunities. And what we were looking at that time was how to bring about rapid economic growth for Lagos. Emphasis on rapid. I'm emphasizing rapid because I think it's what Nigeria needs today, rapid economic growth. And we're looking at, in terms of Lagos, that Lagos was 25% water. And this was about the time that the SDGs were being put in place. And you had this conference in Brazil at that time. I think it was 2013, just about the time we were getting ready for a campaign. And that's where the concept of the ocean economy came up. And basically, ocean economy, as the name suggests, is looking at economic activities that revolve around the ocean, the seas, rivers, and other bodies of water. So coming back to Lagos, we then said, well, look, if Lagos is 25% water, what can we do? How can we leverage on that asset? Because it becomes an asset. And we looked at job creation. We looked at food security. We looked at water transportation. We looked at it in terms of logistics base for the Gulf of Guinea, because we found out that the distance between Lagos and the Gulf of Guinea was more or less the same as from the Niger Delta. And we thought, well, look, we could tap into it. There was insecurity in the Niger Delta. We could take advantage of or use Lagos as a logistics base for the Gulf of Guinea. We looked at it in terms of enhancing the aquatic splendor of Lagos, and of course, have tourism build on that. And basically, those were the key points in terms of the ocean economy. And it's a big, I mean, there's huge potential. So that was for a subnational state like Lagos. But when you look at it from the national point of view, it's even bigger. I mean, if you look at the records, you'll find that you're looking at today of a $1.5 trillion business globally. 3 billion people employed across the globe. I think for Africa, we have figures of about $300 billion. But when we're talking about Nigeria, I think for the lowest hanging fruit for us in terms of rapid growth would be our maritime industry, the ports. If you look at our ports today, you'll find that if you look at the figures of the NPA, I think NPA has some 6 ports. They have their half-year result showed them doing about just under 200 billion naira in terms of revenue. So if you extrapolate that to 1 year, you'd be talking about 400 billion. That's what, under $500 million. And what they've given to government in half year is about a quarter. So it means that all government, all Nigeria is earning from our ports today is just over $100 million. Now, if you now put that with the Lekki Deep Sea Port, for example, and look at the projections, where they project that at its full, this year, you're looking at about $300 billion, where the federal and state governments will be collecting about $200 billion. So there's, in terms of today, how we hit the ground running for that industry, is to say, look, these ports, we can do a lot more. $100 billion a year to the federal government, I mean, it's peanuts. So it's to look at those problems.
It's something we can look at those problems. I'll come to you, Mr. Iroche, by also asking this question, owing to the fact that conversations about the sea have spanned for so many years. In fact, I think it was Hugo Grotius, the Dutch thinker that wrote one of the first formative books, Mare Liberum, The Free Sea, as regards laws and administration of the sea and how nations can make wealth from it. And that book is quite very expansive and it's still a model today. Hugo Grotius' thinking is still a model today as regards the sea. But you are also bringing the tech model. You're talking about AI, AI to liberate the seas. Probably, are you also thinking of ChatGPT for seas, for our seas? Good to see you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rufai, Ayo, and my good friend, Jimmy Agbaje. Jimmy Agbaje has railed out a lot of statistics, which, as you know, I have shared in my publication in one of the newspapers lately. The blue economy, a lot of people asked when it was created, what is blue economy? Jimmy has defined it, economy that comes from the exploitation and exploration of the ocean, the seas, and the bodies of water. It was Arthur Clarke who said that it's inappropriate to call our planet Earth instead of ocean, because the Earth is 70% body of water, and it has about 252 quadrillion gallons of water in the world. So Jimmy touched on Lagos State. Well, although I live in Lagos, I'm not a Lagosian. I come from Abia. We have our own bodies of water all over Nigeria. We are not reinventing the wheel, but we are giving focus and prominence to marine and the blue economy. If you recall that by 1977, about 19 states structured then, the government, federal government created river basin authorities. You have the Hadejia, you have the Benue-Wena, you have the Anambra Imo. And these river basin authorities were really meant to tap into the economy of the rivers and Lake Chad and all the water bodies in Nigeria. But did they achieve the purpose for which they were established? The answer is no. Like we know that the world fisheries and shrimping economy is about $1 trillion per annum, and Africa is just doing about a few billion dollars of that economy. If you recall that in pharmacy, where my brother is a specialist, you have a lot of medications that come from under the sea. And where AI comes in is to monitor the ocean bed, to see the activities under the sea, to see those plants and fish and other marine organisms that produce medication against cancer, against pain, and all kinds of ailments. They find them in the sea. There is nothing that you have on earth that is not replicated in sea. You have opportunity for tourism. We have so many springs, there's one spring, I think somewhere in Osun. You have all over the Federation. You have, and there's a need to have a coordination of all that's going on in the blue economy. We also have the Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research that has been there, and the civil servants are waiting to be empowered and to take the blue economy very, very seriously. Now, Jimmy had mentioned transportation, tourism, but there is a need to coordinate, and that ministry is supposed to be coordinated by the minister and the finance minister and coordinating minister of the economy and the minister of health and the coordinating minister for the health sector. They should work in harmony with the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Petroleum, because you have serious pollution in the Niger Delta that mitigates against fishing and tapping the economy of the ocean. So there is a lot of work to be done, and it has to be synchronized because there are lots of interfaces. Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Petroleum, like I said, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Transport, and you also have sea ambulances that would that would bypass most of the traffic that you have when people have critical health challenges. Yeah. And again, we have to look at AI helping us in terms of monitoring the activities in the ocean and the sea-going vessels. And it also would guide against pilfering and spillage. It will forewarn you when there is a spillage. It will also forewarn government when there is overfishing or bycatch. When I say overfishing, I mean there should be mesh sizes that will make sure that fishes of certain sizes do not pass, are not caught in the net. Right. And the kind of animals that you want for financial and economic purposes, you do not fish. So they are called the bycatch. All right, so AI comes in that way.
So, Iroche, I'd like to ask you a bit further, because in your submission, you talked about the importance or the role that AI plays in climate change and disaster management. And that's quite a big conversation, especially in regards to recent climate change effects across the country. Beyond that is when you hear AI, a lot of people immediately hear substitution of jobs for human beings. So whilst it is fantastic in terms of what you've highlighted, are there any chances that it would go against the job creation agenda of this particular administration, or would it enhance it? That's the question I'd like to ask you. And then for Mr. Agbaje, I'd like you to please share with us in terms of the potential. Mr. Iroche had talked about the $1 trillion economy just in fisheries alone. But we look at transportation, the ports. A lot of people have talked about the fact that there's congestion in the Lagos port, so we should expand it, build ports in other parts of the country. I'd like for you to share with us in terms of setting the agenda for the brand new minister in terms of tapping into the potential of our ports, not just in Lagos, but across Nigeria. I'll start with you, Mr. Iroche.
Okay, thank you very much for that question, Ayo. Those of us in the eastern part of the country have been screaming that we should utilize Port Harcourt, Port, One, Calabar, Sapele, and Warri. My father was a seaman. He was a pioneer staff of the Nigerian National Shipping Line. And I remember as a child, growing up in the 50s and the 60s, that daddy used to sail to Warri, to Sapele, and those ports are lying fallow. No one's using them again. So we should decentralize Lagos. It will decongest traffic. And you know that a lot of these containers actually are imported from Eastern traders who send their goods to the north, to the Middle Belt, and all over the country. So if we decentralize Lagos, there was a time heavy-duty vehicles used to park on Eco Bridge and all the bridges in Lagos. And I read an article then that you are tampering with the integrity and the stability of those bridges because we were waiting to clear containers from from Lagos Wharf. So let us use Port Harcourt, let us use Sapele, let us use Wadi, and let us use Calabar. And back to AI. AI will enhance productivity of the blue economy that will create jobs. You don't, I mean, when AI can foresee climate change before it happens. It can preempt and have almost perfect forecast of the weather, and that helps the ocean-going vessels also. It also helps you to monitor the tidal waves before they happen. It also monitors when fishes migrate. You know, they have seasons where they spawn, when they have to procreate. So AI can tell you where you are about to overfish, where the large species are, the different species. It can number most of the marine organisms and can decipher which ones are for medicinal purposes and which ones are for food. So if at the level at which we are now, we are not shrimping in Nigeria. Our continental shelf is very rich. We have not done 1% of our potential. AI would galvanize our productivity, thereby creating multiplier effect in the economy.
I'm sure they'll be happy to hear that. So it's not taking our jobs, it's going to actually provide more opportunities for jobs. Great. Mr. Agbaje, with regards to, added to that question is, do you think Mr. Agboyega Oyetola has what it takes to manage this huge ministry?
Let me answer the easier one first before the last one. I think with regards to the ports, you talked about maybe having more ports. I think the issue first is to first get the ones we have right. You see, the ports business is very competitive. If we look at the rankings for ports, there's no Nigerian port in Africa that is first 10. So when you're ranking the first 10 ports in Africa, Africa's largest economy does not even rank, none of our ports ranks in. And basically you assess the efficiency of ports and the way they generate their activity is basically based on two factors. Access of ships to your ports, access in terms of the ease of coming in, of the size of ships that you can receive, and also how you then handle the movement, the land movement from and to the ports. And so that tells you, we have, like I said, I think the NPA has 6 ports. It's got Apapa Complex, it's got Tinkan, and it's got 4 in the Niger Delta.
Yes.
You know, and you just find out that those 4 are, of course, not doing much. Lagos is congested, but it's congested, it's not efficient because it is not doing right. And what are the issues that come into play? You begin to look at things like the way ports, you're talking about storage at the ports. I mean, if you go to Apapa ports, it's congested. The way the concessioning was done, I think, was faulty. So you have a storage problem. You have to talk about the capacity, the human capacity. That's in terms of the logistics also. What kind of equipment are we using to handle our ports? Because all these affect the turnaround time. They affect the way you handle goods. So I would say before building more ports, in any case, I'm not even sure we have money to build ports at this point in time. Of course, except it's a private thing. I mean, you've got Lekki and you've got a few other private ports, which would come into play. But hitting the ground running for the minister is to look at the present ports. Look at Lagos, look at Tinkan Island, Apapa, Tinkan Island, and say, what is the problem? Why is it that it's taking such a long turnaround time? Look at how we can get the ships to come in. And once you can correct that, look at the concession. I think within the last 1 week, we had issues of even concessionaires saying, then reports that they were not even paying their fees to government and all that. Look at them. Those that are not making it work should be asked to go. It might be a time to decongest the kind of concessioning that they have done in that place. Because really, the only way those ports are going to work is to improve the access from the sea and also to and from land. Once you can get that right, then activities will improve. Of course, like I said, capacity, the dock workers, You have to understand, you have to build capacity. They have to be trained. Logistics, storage, and these are some of the issues that come into play. And once you can get that right, then it's easier to work on the Niger Delta, because the essence of the Niger Delta ports was to service the oil and gas sector, was also to be able to get goods to the hinterland, up north and all, but they're not functional. And I think we have to just get it right, and we'll get better. As to whether the minister is cut out for this job, well, you know, there's been this debate or discussion as to putting round pegs in round holes. And I think what matters is the kind of support that he gets. If, you know, the problem we have in governance in Nigeria is that politicians tend to spend 95% of their time trying to, you know, to get power. And do the remaining 5% on what to do when they get there in terms of governance. Also, it's either how to get, so 95% is how do I get there? When I get there, I also spend 95% on how to stay there. Now, and that's why it's different from the developed countries, where you say, oh, anybody can be Minister of Health, anybody can be this, anybody can be that. But that's because there's a system that backs it up. And I think what matters is that the minister, if he has the right caliber of people to give him the know-how, then he will succeed once he himself is now able to implement, because implementation is key. And that he himself realizes that, you know, we are in trouble, and the ocean economy, or the marine and blue economy as it's called, is one way, within a period of 6 months to 1 year, to add significant income revenue to Nigeria. And that it has to be similar to what you have in the digital economy, that what the digital economy has done or is doing for Nigeria, that the marine and blue economy must be running after the digital economy. That's what matters. That's what I would say at this point in time.
Okay, Mr. Iroche, let me start by saying that a number of things are being said by so many people. I think way back in 2015, Olisa Agbakuba, SAN, wrote, I think I'm trying to look for the material somewhere. He wrote something about the fact that Nigerian blue economy can generate up to 7 trillion naira at that time. And that was a paper I wrote that says strategic action for Nigeria's maritime sector in a blog. Now, when we look at someone who's been saying this for almost 10 years, and then fast forward to 2023, we're having a minister for that sector. What do you think has to be done in terms of policy direction, not just for a ministry just being created, but it's policy direction and roadmap that would ensure that this is going to be sustainable and it will keep on for the rest of whatever number of years that this government is in place, and it will be used by the next administration and the following administration so that Nigeria taps into this blue economy? That will be my question to you. And then, Mr. Agbaje, please help us understand, in terms of what has happened to Lagos over the years, we know that there are agencies of government that are there, that are doing things, NIMASA and others that are working within the sector, but the failing is still there. There are problems and challenges for the blue economy, pollution and piracy and criminal activities in the Gulf of Guinea. You have been interested in running Lagos. What do you think Lagos can do to make sure that these issues are addressed and make it easy? So let's start with you, sir, Mr. Iroche.
Thank you very much. Let me go back on the issue of ports very quickly. Instead of building new ports, we should resuscitate Port Harcourt, Calabar, Sapele, and Warri. Why do we build and not maintain? Why do we just keep building structures that we cannot maintain? So that is the point we should emphasize, to resuscitate and revamp those ports. Very important. Number two, on Olisa Bakoba, we had for a long time, I'm sure it's Olisa's cousin, Mr. Bakoba, who was Nigeria's representative in the International Maritime Organization in London. They understand the maritime, they understand the marine and the blue economy very, very well. And policies are not the issues in Nigeria. The Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research was carved out of the Federal Department of Fisheries, I think in November 1975. And all the policies are there, clearly stated. What's important is the spirit. It is not the letter. The letter is there, the policies are all there. What do you need? Enabling environment, security. We have our Navy, and we should also look at the 68 exclusive legislative list, where the central government is 100% in charge of marine and the blue economy. In other climes, it's a mixture between the regions, the sub-regions, and the national. Yet we know that while you're doing your marine and blue economy, the Navy has to secure our waterways. But the states themselves also should have their own version of a blue economy. In Abia State, for instance, we have the Azumili Blue River. It is a unique, it is blue. And we have such water bodies that the state governments should have their own policies to guide tourism and the exploration and economic development of the water bodies in the sub-regions. Everything should not be centralized with federal government. And let me jump into the question of if Governor Oyetola can do the job. Someone who has governed a state, we expect that a minister should be a general manager. He doesn't have to be an expert, because he has within his ministry people who are oceanographers, navigators, fishermen, and it's for him to sit down, set policies, and guide them. The civil service is not as bad as people think. They have very, very good people. It is for you to identify those who are ready to work, to identify the sycophants, and some people who are just marking time in the ministry. Push them aside. The Pareto theorem that 20% of the people do 80% of the job. And if you're serious to get your ministry up and going, you will get it up and going, irrespective of the fact that you are not a fisherman or a marine engineer. It doesn't matter. If you have what it takes to be a leader, then you can lead.
Okay, so help us look into the challenges of blue economy, especially in a place like Lagos and all the other issues that...
Yeah, I think it's still having to get the concept right. You know, you've got to have a picture of what you want. And I think the closest I can put is my own experience going to Venice. Venice is what is called the City of Waters. It's got about 100 and something islands, over 100 islands. But you know, just like Sonny said, it's a life of its own. If you go to Venice, you've got police boats. You know, just let's take our land issues and just convert it to water. You've got police boats, just like you have police cars on land. You've got ambulances on the water. You've got the houses are on water. You know, the mode of transportation is boats. And so you find that by the time the government, we begin to see police boats, for example, on our Lagos waters, then it's difficult for the water transporter to allow its passengers on its boat without the safety jackets, for example. You know, because that's what happens. You know, people feel they can get away with it. There's a lot of impunity. So when you have that policing going on there, policing, of course, is also working against insecurity. You know, it's said that you cannot go on water at past 7, or you know, there's a time. You enforce it, at least at the beginning, until things start to work.
Consistent waste disposal.
Waste disposal, the same thing. That you know those who are disposing of this waste. So it's still got to do with regulation. It's got to do with impunity and fighting impunity and saying this is where we're going. Just like you have in those countries we look at, Singapore, you know you cannot throw anything or else you are in trouble. But here, I can beg. Here, I know somebody. You know, and once you can do that, then you can get away with murder.
Okay, as we wrap up, less than 2 minutes, 2 quick wins you like to say in the maritime sector we could focus on as we wrap up, and also to you, Mr. Iroche, 2 quick wins.
The minister should look at the ports.
Yes.
That's the lowest hanging fruit that can bring about money very quickly. And once he can focus on that, I'm sure in 6 to 1 year, there'll be difference in income revenue for Nigeria.
Mr. Iroche?
The government should support the new ministry with resources that they need to do their jobs. I will conclude by saying, quoting Fela in Water No Get Enemy, Ko sohun to le se, ko ma lomi. So water is key, and we must take our marine and blue economy very seriously, not the usual lip service.
All right. I'll conclude by saying, Omi Yolota, oh, water. You know, get enemy. The morning show continues. Thank you all for being here.